All right, so you're here with us on the deep dive because you're the kind of person who really likes to just dive deep into these really fascinating topics.
Yeah, that's right.
You want to get smart, you want to do it quick, and that's exactly what we're all about here.
We like to go deep.
Exactly. We're not messing around.
So today we are diving into Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea.
Oh, yeah.
And this one's kind of interesting. It's one of those books that I think a lot of people read in high school, and they come away with it maybe thinking, okay, so it's a pretty straightforward adventure story.
Yeah.
An old fisherman struggles with a giant marlin.
Yeah, like a good old man versus nature kind of story.
Exactly.
Right.
But, as we've been digging into all of this really amazing critical analysis of The Old Man and the Sea,
Yeah.
it turns out that it's actually like way more complex than that. Like there are all these layers.
So much going on under the surface. Yeah. So what we're going to do today is really kind of unpack that for you and hopefully answer this big question, which is, what is it about this seemingly simple story
Right.
that just keeps resonating with readers, all these years later? I mean, people are still talking about this book and writing about this book.
It's true.
So clearly there's something really special about it.
Well, and I think it connects with people in a way that maybe even Hemingway himself didn't anticipate.
Yep. Right.
It goes beyond just the adventure tale.
Totally. So
Yeah.
so one of the things that really jumped out at me, and it seems like this is something that a lot of the critics agree on, is that Santiago's struggle with the marlin, like that whole epic battle,
Right.
can actually be seen as this like reflection of Hemingway's own artistic struggle.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the most fascinating interpretations of the novel. I think that it's almost like a private parable
Yeah.
for Hemingway's own creative process.
Yeah, and when you think about it that way, like marlin, it's not just a fish anymore, right? It's like it represents this huge artistic achievement,
Oh.
like the masterpiece that every writer is, trying to chase.
That elusive masterpiece. Yeah.
Yeah, and Santiago's fight, this solitary, grueling fight to catch this fish and then bring it back to shore.
Yeah, he goes through a lot.
Oh my gosh, he does. It's like a metaphor for the struggle that Hemingway himself went through, like as a writer, just like wrestling with the words and trying to make something great.
Well, and he even says in, one of his letters, or I think it was an interview actually, he said, "It is because we have had such great writers in the past that a writer is driven far out past where he can go out to where no one can help him."
Wow. Yeah, that's so powerful.
Like he's talking about this feeling of being totally alone
Right.
when you're striving for something really, really significant. And that just resonates so much with Santiago's experience in the novel.
Absolutely. I mean, he literally goes too far out. He even admits that in the story.
Because
He's out in this deep ocean, completely by himself, facing this monumental challenge, and there's nobody to help him.
no. And that sense of isolation is something that Hemingway really struggled with, I think.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how like both Santiago and Hemingway are portrayed as these like super serious, I mean, almost grim characters.
Right.
They have this incredible resolve, this like determination and a kind of perfectionism
Oh, yeah.
that you see in both of their crafts, whether it's fishing or writing.
And that's what makes them so compelling, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're kind of rooting for Santiago, even though you know how it's going to end.
Right.
And I think people felt that way about Hemingway, too. They were fascinated by his dedication to his craft.
And it's not just like blind stubbornness either, right?
Yeah, not at all.
It's like they both have this like deep knowledge and skill, and they've like honed their crafts over years and years.
It's like this mastery that comes from experience.
Yeah, like Santiago, he's not just some random guy who decided to go fishing.
No, he's the real deal.
Yeah, he's like a true professional, and we even hear about his past. He was known as the champion.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Like he had beaten all these other fishermen in these like, head-to-head competitions.
And a reputation.
Yeah, and even when he's facing this massive marlin, something that could easily destroy him, he never completely loses faith in himself.
He doesn't give up.
He doesn't, and he even says, "I may not be as strong as I think, but I know many tricks and I have resolution."
Yeah, that line always gets me. It's like he's acknowledging his limitations, but he's not letting them define him.
Totally. And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to,
Absolutely.
that feeling of like, maybe I'm not the best or the strongest, but I've got experience and I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, that's the spirit.
And it's like Hemingway is putting so much of himself into Santiago,
Oh, I definitely see that.
Like all of that knowledge and skill that Santiago has with fishing, it's like It's almost a mirror of Hemingway's own approach to writing. Like he was so meticulous with his words.
Oh, yeah, he was famous for that.
Yeah, like every sentence was like carefully crafted, and he was always striving for perfection.
And the critics picked up on that, too. And they talked about his, like, sparse prose
Yeah.
and how every word was so deliberate.
Right. It's like he's doing the same thing with his writing that Santiago does with his fishing lines, just like keeping everything tight and
Yeah,
precise.
there's no wasted effort.
No wasted effort. Exactly. And this whole idea of like struggling against these huge odds, and knowing that like you could win, but you could also lose everything.
Yeah, that tension is always there.
Yeah, it seems like that was really important to Hemingway, you know?
Oh, yeah. I think it was almost like a heroic ideal for him.
Right. Like it
Yeah.
was the struggle itself that really mattered.
Yeah, the process of facing those challenges and pushing yourself to the limit.
Totally.
Yeah.
So to understand this connection even better, we should maybe like take a step back and look at Hemingway's earlier work.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
Because, in his early books, it's like he was very much drawing from his own personal experiences,
Hmm.
like his childhood, his young adulthood, and even like the public attention that he was starting to get as a writer.
And that really resonated with readers at the time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, his early work was super popular.
Yeah, because it was tapping into something that a lot of people were feeling.
Like what?
Well, World War I had just happened, and that had a huge impact on Hemingway's generation.
Right.
And his fiction,
Yeah.
it captured that sense of disillusionment and spiritual devastation that a lot of people were experiencing.
And it wasn't just like the war itself, right? It was like the whole world felt kind of broken and chaotic.
Exactly. And Hemingway's heroes, they weren't these like traditional heroic figures. They were flawed
Mhm.
and they were struggling. And I think that made them more relatable to readers who were trying to make sense of this new world.
So in his early work, it was like this really powerful blend of his own personal experiences and these broader public themes that were really resonating with people.
Exactly. He was speaking to his own generation's anxieties and concerns.
Okay, so then what happened?
Well, it seems like as Hemingway got more and more famous, the public scrutiny and the critical analysis of his work also intensified.
Oh, yeah, I bet that was tough.
Oh, yeah, it was. And our sources suggest that this increased attention actually led him to become more guarded in his writing.
Really?
Yeah, like he was maybe intentionally concealing some of his personal emotions and his expertise.
Wow, so it was like a reaction to all the attention.
Exactly. He was kind of pulling back.
And then there was that whole backlash against his subject matter, right?
Oh, yeah, some critics, they just didn't get his fascination with things like bullfighting and fishing.
Right, they thought it was like too narrow or too self-absorbed.
Yeah, they thought he should be writing about bigger issues.
So The Old Man and the Sea, it kind of comes at this really interesting point in his career where he's like maybe stepping back from some of those more personal themes, but also like returning to this idea of universal struggle.
Yeah, and I think that's why it resonated so strongly with readers, because it worked on those two levels.
So it's both a very personal story for Hemingway and this like universal symbol for everybody else.
Exactly. And that brings us back to our earlier point about Santiago being a representation of Hemingway himself.
Right, like the dedicated artist facing challenges and maybe feeling a little bit insecure about his place in the world.
Yeah, and the marlin then becomes this symbol of the masterpiece that he's trying to create.
And then the sharks come in.
Oh, yeah, those sharks.
I mean, the critics have a field day with those sharks.
They do, and I think their interpretation is really interesting. They see the sharks as a symbol of the critics themselves.
Whoa, like they're the ones who come in and try to tear down this incredible achievement that Santiago has worked so hard for.
Exactly, and it's like they're devouring the marlin, which represents Hemingway's art.
And that makes so much sense when you think about all the criticism that Hemingway's own heroes had faced in the past.
Yeah, he was definitely sensitive to that.
So it's like this really powerful image, this thing of beauty that's been created through like immense effort, and then it just gets destroyed by these external forces.
It speaks to the vulnerability of the artist.
Right, like even when you create something amazing, there's always the risk that it'll be misunderstood or rejected.
And I think that's something that a lot of creative people can relate to.
Totally. But the story isn't just about art, right?
No, it's definitely bigger than that.
Like Santiago, he becomes this symbol of like the human condition,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like he's dealing with all this hardship and he's getting older and he's facing death.
And he's doing it with grace and dignity.
Yeah, and even though he loses the marlin in the end, there's this sense that he still won somehow.
Yeah, it's like a spiritual victory.
Exactly. And I think that's why the book was so successful when it came out in 1952,
Hmm.
you know? It was like people saw it as this portrait of the artist in his later years, still struggling, but still holding on to his values.
And still finding meaning in the struggle itself.
Right. And Hemingway was really smart about how he wrote the story. It's deceptively simple,
Yeah.
but there's so much depth there.
Layers upon layers.
And it allows readers to connect with it on all these different levels. You can see your own struggles reflected in Santiago's, whether those struggles are creative or professional or just like the challenges of everyday life.
Yeah, it's a story that speaks to everyone in a different way.
And I think that's what makes it so timeless.
It's a story about what it means to be human.
So to wrap things up, we've been talking about how The Old Man and the Sea can be seen as this like really powerful parallel to Hemingway's own life.
Yeah,
And how Santiago's journey mirrors the struggles that a lot of artists go through.
right. Like that feeling of isolation and the pressure to create something great.
Exactly. And we've seen how the marlin can be interpreted as this symbol of the masterpiece, and the sharks represent the critics who are always trying to tear down great art.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the story is about so much more than that.
Right. It's about human resilience and the ability to find meaning and purpose even in the face of defeat.
And that's a message that continues to resonate with people today.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on, as you go about your day.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about the things that you're really passionate about, the things that you put your heart and soul into.
Yeah, like those big goals and dreams.
Exactly. And maybe those things have their own marlins. Those like big challenges that you're trying to overcome.
Right, those mountains you're trying to climb.
And maybe they also have their own sharks, the obstacles and the setbacks that threaten to like derail you.
Yeah, the things that make you question yourself.
But here's the thing, even when you face those challenges, and even when you maybe don't achieve everything you set out to do,
Yeah.
there's still value in the struggle itself.
That's right. Like it's the journey that really matters and the lessons that you learn along the way.
And the growth that you experience.
So keep diving deep, folks. Keep exploring, keep pushing yourselves. And remember that even when it feels like you're all alone out there, there's always something to be gained from the struggle.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
See you next time.